On the night we celebrated her birthday, I watched a man toast to my wife's future, while I sat right there, holding her hand. Everyone at the table laughed, clinked glasses, smiled like they were in on something, and maybe they were. Her 34th birthday fell on a Thursday, but we celebrated it on Saturday. Seemed easier that way, more people could come, no one had to rush from work, and she liked the idea of a proper night. That was her phrase. Let's do it proper this year. We booked a private room at a downtown restaurant with warm lights, polished glasses, and enough exposed brick to make you feel like the food would come with a story behind it. 10 of us around one long table. She was glowing, honestly. Blue dress, soft waves in her hair, the same perfume she used when we first started dating. People kept saying how amazing she looked. I didn't disagree, but I watched her more than I spoke. That had become a pattern. Her sister was there, already 2 glasses in when we arrived. A couple of coworkers I didn't know well, people from her office who I always forgot the names of. Melissa was there, of course. Her best friend since college. The kind of person who walks into a room like it's waiting for her. Loud, charming, a little too observant for comfort. And then there was Thomas. Thomas wasn't technically a close friend. More like one of those people who hovered around our social circle long enough to become a fixture. I'd always known him as the guy from her job who helps with big campaigns. Quiet, polite, neutral, almost to a fault. He brought wine, not the cheap kind. A bottle with a label that looked handwritten and foreign. She smiled when he handed it over. A specific smile. The kind that lingers a little too long in the eyes. I caught that. Stored it away. The meal was nice. They brought out courses I couldn't pronounce but pretended to enjoy. She was in her element, laughing, telling stories, raising her glass every 10 minutes for another toast. At one point, Melissa made her stand up so they could do a proper birthday moment. They lit a candle on a tiny dessert. Everyone clapped, and I smiled like I meant it. Then came the toast. Thomas stood up first. He cleared his throat and held up his glass like it was something he practiced in front of a mirror. To Claire, he said. To 34. To clarity. To new chapters, and writing them with intention. Everyone laughed, clinked glasses. Someone said, wow, poetic. But Claire just nodded slowly, like she understood something the rest of us didn't. I raised my glass with the rest of them. Didn't say a word. Later that night, after the bill was paid and goodbyes were said and the lift had dropped us off at our house, she kicked her shoes off in the hallway and looked at me. That went well, right? I nodded. Yeah, good night. She smiled and walked into the bedroom. The moment she disappeared behind the door, I stood in the dark hallway for a second longer than I needed to. Just listening, thinking. It wasn't a bad night, but something in the air felt staged. Like I had applauded a performance I hadn't auditioned for. She went to bed before I did. I stayed in the kitchen for a while, rinsing glasses that didn't need rinsing. Let the hum of the refrigerator fill the silence. I replayed the dinner in my head, not the food or the jokes or the clinking of forks, but the small moments. Thomas pulling out her chair without hesitation. Melissa jumping in to defend her when someone asked a personal question. Claire checking her phone under the table, just once, just fast enough to pretend it didn't happen. I wasn't suspicious. Not exactly, but I was paying attention now. It wasn't about jealousy. It wasn't about catching someone in the act. It was simpler than that. Sometimes your body knows before your mind is ready to admit it. A shift in tone. A glance that lingers half a second too long. A pattern breaking, just slightly, just enough. That night was when it started for me. Not the betrayal. The awareness. And once it begins, it doesn't stop. You can't rewind it or talk yourself down. You just start seeing. Not all at once. Just enough to make everything feel a little off. Like walking into your own house and noticing one picture frame is crooked. No sound. No smoke. Just a shift. That's what her birthday was. The frame tilted. And me, standing in the hallway, finally noticing. From the outside, we looked fine. The house stayed clean. Dinners still happened, usually around 7:30. We had the kind of arguments that never woke the neighbors. I remembered birthdays. She remembered what brand of toothpaste I liked. Our friends described us as solid. That was the word Melissa used once at a party. You two are solid. I didn't correct her. It wasn't a lie, exactly. More like a snapshot taken with the wrong lens. Technically accurate, emotionally distant. Claire and I had been together just over 8 years. Married for 5. We met at a mutual friend's bonfire, back when I still thought casual beer meant a real conversation. She was magnetic in that way some people are, not just pretty, but fully present. She didn't ask where I worked. She asked what made my Sundays feel slow and good. I remember thinking, that's a weird question. I also remember answering it. We moved fast. First dates became sleepovers, which became duplicate toothbrushes and grocery runs together. 6 months later, we signed a lease. She picked out curtains. I painted a wall. It felt like momentum, not rushing. The proposal was quiet. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. I really did love her. I still do, in that complicated, post-love kind of way, where the feeling doesn't vanish, it just changes color. Back then, she'd leave notes on the fridge with dumb drawings of animals and motivational quotes. You got this, bear. That kind of thing. We binge-watched bad crime shows. She'd talk through every twist like she could solve it first. I always let her think she did. She hated mornings. She loved thunderstorms. She was the kind of person who double-checked the oven twice after turning it off. I still catch myself doing that now. The cracks didn't come with shouting or slammed doors. They came like fog, gradual, quiet, wrapping itself around the routine until the routine felt like a stage play. I think it started about a year and a half before her birthday dinner. Nothing specific. Just moments. The way she started locking her phone with a passcode. Not unusual, not suspicious, just new. She said it was because of company policy. Fair. I didn't ask twice. Then came the late meetings. Real ones, I think, at first. Then more frequent. Then unexplained. She'd come home drained, but her eyes didn't look tired. They looked elsewhere. One night, she got in been late," said her meeting ran over. I asked if she'd eaten. She said yes, but I saw the untouched takeout in the fridge that I'd left for her. She smiled anyway, said, "Thanks for thinking of me." That was Claire. Always polite, always graceful, even when the truth was bending in her hands. I didn't suspect anything. I want to be clear about that. It's easy to look back and connect dots that weren't visible then. Hindsight feels sharp, but at the time, I wasn't thinking she's cheating. I was thinking, we're drifting. That's a different kind of sadness. Less fire, more slow erosion. And then there was Thomas. He'd show up for gatherings here and there. Nothing dramatic, just present. He always brought something. Craft beer, charcuterie, fancy chocolate bars with sea salt. The kind of stuff that says, I pay attention to what people like. At first, I appreciated him. He seemed reliable, thoughtful. He offered to help me carry chairs once during a barbecue, and I remember thinking, Claire has good taste in friends. The irony doesn't escape me now. Melissa, she was still around, still close to Claire in that way longtime friends are, entitled to everything, involved in every detail. She asked a lot of questions, but never too many, just enough to seem caring. In those months leading up to the birthday, I started noticing that Melissa and Claire had a lot of girls' nights, again, more than usual. Same places, same story, wine bars, catching up, laughing too hard to text back. And every time she came home, she smelled like something unfamiliar. Not bad, just different. Sense a funny thing. You can't describe it, but you know when it doesn't belong. Still, I didn't ask. I think a part of me didn't want to break the glass unless I was sure there was fire behind it. That's the coward's logic, I guess. But it's also survival. Because once you know, really know, there's no unknowing. You can't walk backward out of truth. So instead, I let it build. I convinced myself that she was just tired, or that we'd hit that comfortable silence phase people write about. I read an article once that said marriages go through quiet seasons, like winter. That helped. I told myself we were just in winter. That spring would come. But deep down, I started looking at her the way you look at a painting in someone else's house. Familiar, but not yours. We'd lie in bed at night, not touching. She'd scroll through her phone with the screen angled slightly away from me. I'd stare at the ceiling fan, listening to the soft buzz of spinning blades. Sometimes I'd whisper something. She'd laugh, then go back to scrolling. I stopped whispering. And still, not a single fight. That's what people don't tell you. Sometimes the end doesn't come with shouting. Sometimes it just comes with silence. And silence was all we had. It was around mid-February when I first noticed the calendar thing. Claire had been using a physical planner for years. Leather-bound, thick paper, the kind with color-coded tabs and tiny motivational quotes at the bottom of each page. She said digital apps stressed her out, so I never questioned it. But one morning, I saw her swipe away a notification on her phone while she thought I wasn't looking. It was a calendar alert. Something about final tasting, scheduled for a Saturday afternoon. I didn't say anything. We were sitting on the couch. She was sipping coffee, legs curled up underneath her, scrolling through her phone while the news murmured quietly in the background. I watched her thumb pause on the screen for half a second longer than usual, then flick upward. She smiled at something, just slightly, and then caught me watching. "What?" she said. I shook my head. "Nothing." "You smiled." She laughed. "Probably at some dumb meme. Melissa sent me a whole thread this morning." Melissa again. She had become a constant, always a text away, always planning something. Weekend trips, group dinners, art classes, wine tastings. Claire had a new event every other week, and Melissa's name was always attached. "She's on a say yes to life kick," Claire told me once. "Says we're not spontaneous enough." I didn't argue, but I started paying attention. The following week, I opened the mail and found a receipt addressed to her but delivered to our shared home. It was from a stationery boutique across town, one she never mentioned. The purchase was vague, design consultation deposit. No item name, just a date, a time, and a non-refundable amount. I left it on the kitchen counter. That night, she moved it to her purse without comment. The next morning, I checked her desk while she showered. I wasn't looking for anything in particular, just trying to match her words to something tangible. Her planner sat there, closed. I flipped it open. Nothing suspicious. A few brunches, reminders to call her mom, meetings, normal things. But something about it felt curated, like someone had filled it out for public viewing. That night, we had dinner with friends. Melissa was there, of course. So was Thomas. Thomas sat across from Claire. She wore a soft green sweater I hadn't seen before. He complimented it. "You always pick the most specific colors," he said. "That's not just green. That's something else. Like coastal sage." She smiled, pleased. "I like that." I watched their exchange, quiet. Melissa jumped in quickly to steer the conversation. "Can we all agree that Claire has the best taste in literally everything?" she said, raising her glass. Everyone laughed. I nodded along. It was subtle, all of it. Nothing loud, just patterns, gestures, phrases. Claire started listening to new music. One afternoon, I came home early and heard something playing in the background, instrumental piano, something soft but dramatic. She said it helped her focus. I noticed she'd stopped wearing her wedding ring around the house. Not always, just now and then. She claimed she was afraid of scratching it while cooking or working out. I believed her. You learn to believe people when you're trying not to lose them. Still, I watched. One Saturday, she left for a day trip with Melissa. Said it was a wine tasting a few hours out of town. No specifics, just vague enough to sound believable. She came home after dark, a little flushed, talking about how beautiful the vineyard was, how they should do a couple's trip sometime. She kissed my cheek. "We need to travel more." That night, I checked the weather in the area she claimed they'd gone. Rain, heavy rain, flash flood warnings. Her shoes weren't muddy. Her coat was dry. I stood in our hallway, holding her coat, and for the first time, felt something physical in my chest. Not heartbreak, not rage, just confirmation. Whatever it was she was doing, it had already started. And still, I didn't confront her. Why? Because there's a strange moment between suspicion and certainty where you start bargaining with yourself. You convince yourself you're being paranoid. You look for flaws in your own thinking before you're willing to admit the truth in someone else's behavior. I told myself, maybe the vineyard had a covered patio. Maybe Melissa drove. Maybe I was tired, and none of this meant anything. But something inside me had changed. That's the thing about watching a house crack. At first, it's just a hairline in the wall. Then one day, you realize you can feel the wind coming through. That night, I went into the guest room and started gathering papers. Bank statements, insurance forms, documents we hadn't touched in years. I opened a new file on my computer. Personal, private. Nothing drastic. Just preparedness. I wasn't planning an escape, but I stopped assuming I'd stay. A few days later, Melissa texted me, randomly, just a short message. Hope you're doing okay. Claire says you've been quiet lately. I stared at it for a long time before replying. All good. Just working a lot. She sent back a thumbs up, but something in me flinched. I hadn't told Claire I was working late. I hadn't told anyone. So how would Melissa know? Unless Claire was explaining my distance before I even spoke it. That's when I realized they were building a story, and I was the last one to read the script. There's a category of lie that isn't told to hurt you, it's told to guide you. Not away from the truth, necessarily, just around it. Enough that you start believing you misunderstood something, rather than that someone misled you. That's the kind of lie Claire was good at. She never denied anything outright. She just bent things, softened them, shifted context. If she came home late, it was because traffic was brutal. If I didn't hear from her for hours, she'd mention her phone battery like it was an afterthought. If I asked a question too directly, she'd smile like it was sweet I even noticed. And the worst part, it worked. Because I wanted it to. That's the thing most people won't admit. When you start to suspect someone close to you, your first instinct isn't to investigate. It's to protect the image you've built of them. Because if that image breaks, the whole foundation shifts underneath your feet. So instead, you pretend you didn't hear what you heard, or see what you saw. I became an expert at that. One Sunday afternoon, she said she was meeting Melissa for lunch. Something casual, just to catch up. I offered to join, just as a throwaway suggestion. She paused, just a beat too long. She's going through something kind of personal, she said, brushing lint from her sleeve. I think she just wants to vent. I nodded. Of course. She smiled, relieved, kissed me on the cheek. You're the best. She left at 12:40. At 12:58, Melissa posted an Instagram story, her feet in fuzzy socks, curled up on the couch, captioned, "Lazy Sundays are sacred." Not a restaurant, not a wine bar, her apartment. I stared at the screen for a full minute, then closed the app. I didn't call Claire. I didn't text Melissa. I just made a mental note, quietly placing it next to all the others. Later that evening, Claire came home smelling like peppermint and jasmine, her go-to after wearing perfume all day. But the timing was wrong. She usually sprayed that before going out, not before coming home. She hung her coat, smiled, and asked what we should do for dinner. I told her I wasn't hungry. She tilted her head, concerned. Everything okay? Just tired, I said. She hugged me. Her hands were warm. And that hug, it wasn't distant. That's what messed with me the most. She still touched me like she meant it. Still curled into me on the couch some nights. Still laughed at my bad jokes when I tried to lighten the room. Whatever was happening, she hadn't stopped playing her part. And I hadn't stopped hoping I was wrong. But then came the ring. It was midweek. I got home a little earlier than usual. She was still at work, or so I thought. I walked into the bedroom to drop off some dry cleaning, and noticed her jewelry tray on the dresser was empty. Specifically, her wedding band was missing. Nothing else. Just that. I checked the bathroom, thinking maybe she left it by the sink. Nothing. I didn't panic. Just stared at the empty tray. She came home an hour later, smiling, kicked off her heels, asked how my day was. I asked how hers was. She said, long, exhausting. I waited, then casually asked, did you forget your ring this morning? She didn't flinch. Just looked down at her hand like she hadn't realized. Oh, yeah. I left it in my gym bag. I took it off before Pilates yesterday. Believable. Simple. But she hadn't gone to Pilates the day before. I knew that because we'd had dinner with my brother. She came straight from work. Another soft lie. I didn't call her on it. What would be the point? I smiled. Makes sense. She nodded and disappeared into the bathroom. That night, I couldn't sleep. I laid awake listening to her breathing next to me, steady and calm. And I thought about Thomas. He hadn't been around much lately, not since the birthday dinner. Claire said he was traveling for work. I didn't ask where. I figured if she wanted me to know, she'd tell me. But then came an email. It wasn't meant for me. It was addressed to her. I only saw it because she asked me to order something online from her account while she was in the shower. I opened her email to find the confirmation number. That's when the subject line caught my eye. Venue walkthrough confirmation, Thursday at 4 p.m. from Coastal Events and Vineyards. The email was short, polite, thanking Claire and Mr. Thomas for their time and confirming their follow-up meeting with the coordinator. It even listed her meal preference, grilled halibut with seasonal vegetables. There was a link to a private portal, password protected. I didn't try to open it. Didn't need to. That was the first real confirmation. She wasn't just seeing him. They were planning something. That night, I said nothing. We watched a movie on the couch. Something she picked. Something quiet and British. She leaned into me like nothing had changed. Maybe for her, nothing had. But for me, the ground had started to tilt. And I was done pretending it wasn't moving. It was a Friday when I followed her. Not in the dramatic trench coat and sunglasses sense. I didn't trail behind her car like a movie detective or slip into a booth at some dimly lit cafe. I just happened to have the day off. She thought I was working from home. She said she had a hair appointment at noon and then lunch with Melissa around 2. Casual. It's a self-care day, she said, tying her hair back in the mirror. You should do something relaxing too. I nodded. Maybe I will. She left left wearing a light gray coat, lipstick just a shade too bold for a salon, and heels that didn't look comfortable for a casual lunch. I waited 10 minutes. Then I got in my car and drove. I wasn't proud of it. I still don't know what I was hoping to see, maybe to prove myself wrong. Maybe to catch her doing something completely normal. Maybe to confirm that I wasn't losing my mind. But what I saw was a vineyard. Or rather, a coastal event estate, the kind with oversized wooden gates, white gravel driveways, and a name that sounds like a perfume, Laurel Hollow. I parked far enough away to avoid being noticed. She pulled in about 10 minutes after me, in a car I recognized but hadn't seen in a while. Thomas was driving. They didn't kiss. They didn't touch. But they got out like they belonged there together. Claire adjusted her coat. Thomas said something. She laughed. And that laugh, it wasn't casual. It wasn't the laugh she gave to coworkers or strangers. It was the one I used to get when I surprised her with stupid things, like handmade cards or pancakes shaped like animals. They disappeared inside. I sat there with the engine off, listening to the tick of cooling metal under the hood. It wasn't rage. Not yet. It was clarity. They weren't having a fling. This wasn't stolen hotel rooms and deleted messages. This was planned, structured, quiet. It was a life being built. And I was the shadow in the corner of it. I didn't go inside. I didn't storm in and make a scene. That's not who I am. It's never been who I am. Instead, I waited. 37 minutes later, they came back out with a woman in business casual black and a clipboard. She was smiling, pointing toward the far end of the vineyard. Claire nodded. Thomas put his hand lightly on her back for just a second, like a reflex. Like he'd done it before. They shook hands with the woman, thanked her, got back in the car, and left. I stayed a little longer. Eventually, I drove home, stopped for gas, picked up groceries, tried to act like I was a version of myself that still existed 2 hours earlier. When Claire got home that evening, her hair was curled, styled, not just cut. She walked in holding a to-go cup and a tiny box of macarons. Melissa sends her love, she said, setting the box on the counter. She's obsessed with that new place on Linden. You'd hate it. No chairs. I smiled. Sounds terrible. She kissed me on the cheek, humming something under her breath. I asked her how her day went. Relaxing, she said. Then she told me about a fake lunch she never had, with a friend who was never there, and a day that didn't exist. And I nodded, because that was safer, for both of us. Later that night, while she was brushing her teeth, I checked our shared computer, opened a browser, typed in Laurel Hollow events. Their website was clean, tasteful, white and soft gold, the kind of place where couples went to feel important. I clicked the contact page. The name of the event coordinator was right there. Lindsay Cole. The same name from the confirmation email. I copied it. Then I shut the computer, turned out the light, and sat on the edge of the bed for a long time. She came out of the bathroom in a t-shirt and no makeup, climbed into bed like she hadn't just designed her future with someone else. I watched her fall asleep, and I realized something that hit harder than anything else. She wasn't planning to leave me. She was planning to replace me. Clean, quiet, no confrontation, just an erasure. And that's when I stopped thinking like a husband, and started thinking like a man who didn't want to be forgotten. 2 days later, Melissa texted me out of nowhere. It was early evening. Claire had gone out for errands, which these days could mean anything. I was reheating leftovers, trying not to spiral into another quiet breakdown when my phone buzzed. Melissa. Hey, random question. What's your favorite kind of red wine? Asking for a thing. A thing. I stared at the message for a while before typing back. Me. I usually go for a cab. Why? Melissa. Claire's organizing something. Don't tell her I said anything. I didn't respond, because I already knew. Claire wasn't organizing something for me. I put my phone down, opened a beer I didn't want, and sat at the table, watching steam rise off a plate of food I wasn't going to eat. I didn't know it yet, but that message from Melissa would be the last time she tried to cover for Claire without guilt pressing through her thumbs. The following day, I checked our shared credit card account. It wasn't something I did often, but I'd been slowly retraining myself to notice the things I used to skip. One charge stood out. Soul and Bloom Design Company, $480. They specialized in calligraphy. I knew because Claire had shown me their website 2 years earlier when we were invited to a friend's wedding, and she said, if we ever renew vows, I want something like this. I clicked the transaction. It had a note attached. Quantity, 75. Service, custom invitation suite, including RSVP coordination. The billing name, Claire Holden. The secondary contact, Thomas R. Keene. There it was. Not just a fantasy. Not just something they whispered behind my back. A wedding, with a date, a head count, and, apparently, a calligrapher. I leaned back in the chair and laughed. Not loud, just a breathy, stunned thing that didn't sound like me. They had invited 75 people to something that hadn't even been admitted to me. I was still sleeping next to her, still paying half the mortgage, still taking out the trash on Thursdays, but 75 people already knew what I didn't. Later that night, Claire came home with sushi. My favorite, she claimed. She said she felt like we needed a little treat. Said work had been brutal lately and she missed just us. I thanked her, sat with her, ate the salmon rolls while she asked about my day. I told her it was quiet. She kissed my hand across the table and smiled like she meant it. She probably did. Claire had always been good at compartmentalizing. She could fold truths into corners so sharp they felt like clean facts. She probably believed that what she and Thomas had was new, separate. That what we had was ending gently, and that she was handling it like an adult. And I guess, in a way, I let her. Because I didn't scream. I didn't confront her. I didn't break anything. Instead, I printed out the receipt from the calligraphy place, put it in an envelope, slipped it between the pages of a cookbook we never used, Modern Farmhouse Recipes for Gatherings, left it on the kitchen shelf like a silent bookmark, just in case she ever felt brave enough to flip through. The next weekend, we had people over. Claire wanted a small dinner. Low-key, she said. Just Melissa and Thomas, maybe maybe one or two others. She claimed she wanted to feel normal again. I nodded. Let's do it. She made charcuterie, lit candles, put on a playlist I used to love before it became background noise to betrayal. Melissa arrived first. She looked different, nervous, almost. Her usual breezy confidence had a tight edge to it, like she couldn't decide if she should hug me or apologize. She settled on smiling. Thomas came a few minutes later, holding a bottle of wine. Claire greeted him at the door with too much light in her voice. As we all settled into the living room, I found myself watching them the way you watch animals in a nature documentary. Not with judgment, just with curiosity. As if the ecosystem in front of me had evolved without my input. I offered Thomas a drink. He accepted. He made a joke about traffic. Claire laughed. Melissa stayed mostly quiet. She watched Claire the way a person watches a friend they don't recognize anymore. And somewhere in the middle of the conversation, between laughs and anecdotes and meaningless small talk, I saw it. The ring. Not hers. Not mine. On Thomas's pinky finger was a thin, brushed metal band. Simple, elegant, familiar. I'd seen it before, years ago, on a Pinterest board Claire had made. She called it minimal commitment style. At the time, I thought she meant the design. Now I knew better. It was a trial run. Claire cleared the plates around 9:30. Melissa offered to help, but Claire waved her off. I walked into the kitchen and grabbed a bottle of whiskey from the top shelf. Poured one glass, took it out to the patio and sat in the dark. A few minutes later, Melissa joined me. She didn't say anything at first. Just sat. Then, quietly, you know, right? I didn't look at her. Just nodded. I'm sorry, she said. I didn't. I thought it would fall apart on its own. I thought it was just emotional. Temporary. Not anymore, I said. She shook her head. I didn't know they were planning that. Neither did I. Not fully. But now I did. 75 guests. A vineyard. An invitation suite. And a woman who still kissed me goodnight like I was a placeholder. It was a Tuesday when I got the message. Melissa again. No context. No greeting. Just a link and 5 words. You should probably see this. It was a Dropbox folder. The name, Final Proofs, CNT. Claire and Thomas. Of course. I didn't click right away. I sat there for a while, staring at my phone like it was radioactive. Part of me thought I should wait, do this with a clear head, maybe after work. Another part of me knew there'd never be a right time. So I tapped. Inside were subfolders, photos, documents, menu, vows. They hadn't even password protected it. I opened the folder labeled photos. Engagement shots, taken at the same vineyard I'd seen with my own eyes. Claire in a white dress, not a gown, but close. Thomas in a light gray suit. She was smiling in a way I hadn't seen in over a year. Hair blowing back just right. His hand on her waist. I clicked through them slowly, methodically. There were shots of them laughing, leaning into each other, fake spontaneous in that wedding photographer way. A few were even labeled final selects for save the date. It felt like looking at a stranger's life, but I knew that body, that smile, that ring, except the ring she wore wasn't the one I gave her. I moved to the folder labeled documents. Inside was a PDF labeled ceremony schedule, Laurel Hollow. Page 1, introduction and seating. Page 2, walk down the aisle. Page 3, readings from Thomas's sister. Page 4, vows. Claire to Thomas. Thomas to Claire. I clicked vows, and that's when the breath left me. Claire had written them, or maybe Thomas had helped. Either way, they were full of lines that sounded familiar, too familiar. Phrases lifted from notes she'd once written to me. Words she'd said on our wedding day. You are my stillness in motion. I didn't know who I was until you saw me first. I remembered those lines. I believed in them, and now they were being recycled, reused, repurposed for a new performance. I closed the file, scrolled back up. There was one last folder. Guest list. Just a spreadsheet, but it hit like a fist. Names, emails, assigned tables. Not a single person from my side. Not even Melissa. So she'd been cut out too. Maybe that's why she finally sent me the link. Or maybe guilt had finally grown too heavy to carry. I texted her one word. Thanks. She replied a minute later. I didn't know it went that far. I swear. I didn't answer. I sat there for a long time, listening to the hum of the fridge, the soft tick of the wall clock. Claire was at work, or with Thomas, or both. I didn't care. That night, when she came home, she brought takeout. Indian, the place I like. She set the bag on the counter, kissed me on the cheek, and said, I thought we could do something easy tonight. I said, sure. We ate at the kitchen island. She asked about my day. I lied. She lied. It was quiet. Later, while she was brushing her teeth, I stood in the hallway, watching the bathroom door like it might open into a different life. I could hear her humming softly, the same tune she always used when she thought no one was listening. When she came out, she smiled like nothing was wrong. You good? She asked. I nodded. Yeah, just tired. She slipped into bed. I stayed in the hallway a little longer. The next morning, I woke early. She was still asleep. I got dressed quietly, made coffee, and pulled out a notebook I hadn't used in years. I made a list. Not of revenge. Not yet. Just facts. Date of the vineyard reservation. Number of guests. Location. Her exact phrasing in the vows. The vendor emails. The Dropbox. The ring I never gave her. And at the bottom, I wrote one question. Why didn't she just leave me? The question echoed all day. Because that was the thing I couldn't shake. She wasn't trapped. I never made her stay. We never had kids. No shared business. No religious guilt. If she'd said the words, if she told me she was in love with someone else, I would have let her go. I wouldn't have begged. I would have been destroyed, sure, but I would have let her leave with dignity. Instead, she was building something brand new, stone by stone, inside the life we were still pretending to live. And she expected me to stay silent until she was ready to walk away on her own terms. Except now. Now I wasn't waiting anymore. Now I was just deciding how it would end. She asked me to take a weekend trip with her. Said she wanted to reconnect. Claimed things had felt off lately. That made maybe we just needed a little distance from everything: phones, work, distractions. She even picked the place, a quiet cabin up north. Fireplace, hiking trails, no cell signal. Her idea of romantic. I said yes, not because I believed her, because I wanted to see how far she'd go. We drove up Friday afternoon. She talked most of the way, about work, a new project her team was launching, some book she was pretending to read. I nodded when I needed to, asked the right questions. The whole time, I wondered how many of the words leaving her mouth were rehearsed. The cabin was beautiful, rustic but polished, everything made of clean wood and warm stone. She unpacked quickly, lighting a fire and pouring wine like it was a scene she'd memorized. I thought we could just reset, she said, curling up beside me. I nodded. Sure. That night, we sat in front of the fireplace, her legs draped over mine, soft music playing from her phone. She leaned in to kiss me, slow, intentional, and I kissed her back, not because I wanted her, but because I wanted her comfortable. If she believed I was still asleep inside this version of our life, she wouldn't see the exit coming. The next morning, I pretended to sleep in. She got up early, said she was going to take a walk, needed a little air. I waited 10 minutes, then followed. The path behind the cabin was long and winding, carved through redwoods and mossy undergrowth. I kept my distance. After about 15 minutes, she slowed. And then I saw him. Thomas. He stepped out from behind a tree, like it had all been choreographed. They didn't kiss. Not this time. But she touched his arm, whispered something. He laughed. It was short, familiar. They stood there for a few minutes before she handed him something. A small black folder. He opened it, nodded, then turned and walked back into the trees. She stayed for another moment, then headed back toward the cabin. I beat her there by a few minutes. Made coffee. Pretended to be just waking up. Morning, she said, cheeks flushed from the cold. Hey, I replied, yawning. She kissed my forehead. We made breakfast together. Pancakes and eggs. Played board games. Took a fake photo for social media. Her caption later would read, "Weekend reset with my favorite person." And technically, it was true. She just didn't realize I wasn't the person she meant anymore. That night, after she fell asleep, I walked out to the car. Her laptop was in the trunk. She'd forgotten to bring it inside. I opened it. It wasn't password protected. Maybe she thought there was nothing left to hide. I clicked her browser. Checked recent documents. There it was. Wedding checklist. Final.xlsx. Date, May 24th. Guest list, 82. Status, dress pic. Band confirmed. Catering sign. Honeymoon, Thomas handling. I read every line. She'd booked a dress under a different last name, Claire Keane. There it was, in print. No more doubt. No more theory. Just her future, already finalized. And I was the only one who hadn't been informed I was no longer a part of it. I took a photo of the screen, closed the laptop, put it back where I found it. The next day, we packed up. On the drive home, she played a playlist I used to love. Kept her hand on my leg for miles. Talked about maybe repainting the bedroom. I agreed. Told her a darker blue might be nice. She smiled. Exactly what I was thinking. When we got home, she unpacked quickly. Said she had to run a quick errand. Just groceries. I told her I'd make dinner while she was out. She kissed me again, like nothing had changed. As soon as she left, I went to the bedroom, opened the closet, reached for the box I'd kept on the top shelf, the one with our wedding photos, the album, the letters we used to write each other in the early days. I took it all out, placed it on the bed. Then I grabbed a second box, the one I'd started filling 3 weeks ago. My documents, bank info, backup keys, a copy of her wedding files, the screenshot of her vows to Thomas, the ring receipt from the new jeweler, and the invitation prototype from Soul and Bloom. All of it. I closed the box, taped it shut. Tomorrow, I'd drop it off, but not at her office, at her mother's, because if I was going to be erased, I was going to leave a burn mark behind. Nothing illegal, nothing violent, just the truth, delivered, unwrapped, and undeniable. The day it all came down wasn't marked by a storm or screaming or broken glass. It was a birthday, not hers, not mine, Thomas's. Claire didn't know I knew. She said she was going to Melissa's that night for a spa evening, face masks, gossip, wine. I played along, told her to have fun, even joked that she should try not to come back glowing too much or I'd be suspicious. She laughed. Melissa's idea. I wasn't even in the mood. I nodded, kissed her goodbye, and watched her walk out the door like she wasn't walking out of a marriage. 30 minutes later, I was in my car. I already knew the address. A condo in the hills just outside the city. I'd followed the online breadcrumbs, registry deliveries, vendor drop-offs, a geotagged post Thomas had carelessly uploaded 2 weeks ago. Not public, but not private either. A soft launch, I suppose, of their new life. I didn't go there to kick down the door. I went to see, to let reality stop being a spreadsheet and finally become something three-dimensional. The condo was modern. Sharp edges, glass balcony, just enough warm lighting to say, money but not attention-seeking. The kind of place you lease while you wait for your first million to feel permanent. I parked a few houses away, watched. At 8:14 p.m., she arrived. Not in the coat she left in. Not in the car she usually drove. She'd changed. Dress, hair, lipstick. She buzzed in, smiled into the camera. He opened the door. They kissed. Not a peck. Not a mistake. The kind of kiss you give someone you've already promised forever to. I stayed for 5 minutes after that. Didn't need more. On the drive home, I didn't cry. Didn't shake. I wasn't even angry. I was done. That night, she came home around midnight. Kicked off her shoes like nothing had happened. Tiptoed into the bedroom. I kept my eyes closed. Let my breathing stay even. She climbed into bed. Didn't say a word. Neither did I. The next morning, she made pancakes. Played music in the kitchen like it was just another Saturday. And it was. For her. But not for me. I told her I was heading out to run a few errands. She smiled, distracted. Grab oat milk if you pass the store. I nodded. Sure. Instead, I went to her mother's house. house. Claire's mom answered the door in a robe, hair wrapped in a towel, surprised to see me but not unwelcome. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Just wanted to drop something off," I said. I handed her the box. She looked down at it, confused. "What is it?" "Your daughter's new life," I said. "I figured you should see it before you start getting invitations." Then I turned and walked away. She called after me once, then again, but I didn't stop. I didn't need to explain anything. The truth was already printed, dated, organized. Let them read it. Let them draw their own conclusions. Let them know who they were toasting at that vineyard. That night Claire came home to silence. No dinner, no candles, no background music. Just me, sitting on the edge of the couch. She looked at me like I'd broken a rule. "What's going on?" I said nothing, just handed her my phone. It was open to the Dropbox link. I'd left one photo up. Thomas's hand on her waist. Her smiling, eyes closed. She stared at it for a long time. Didn't blink, didn't speak. Finally, quietly, "Where did you get this?" I didn't answer that either. She stepped back like the room had changed shape. "I can explain." "You already did," I said. "In spreadsheets and vows and headcounts." She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again, and then I asked the question that had burned a hole in me for weeks. "Why didn't you just leave me?" That one landed. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She just sank into the nearest chair and stared at the floor. "I didn't want to hurt you," she said. I nodded. "Then maybe you shouldn't have invited 75 people to watch." She didn't respond, because there was nothing left to say. I stood, picked up the bag I'd packed days earlier. She didn't stop me, didn't follow me, and for the first time in months, I felt light, because I'd been erased. But not quietly. They wanted to write me out of the story, but I'd already signed the final chapter, and the ink was dry. I didn't go home after I left. Home wasn't real anymore. I drove to a friend's place across town, someone who didn't ask questions, just handed me a spare key and a cold beer and said, "Stay as long as you need." The next morning, my phone lit up like a dying star. Calls from Claire, from her mother, from numbers I didn't recognize. A few were probably wedding vendors. One of them, I'm pretty sure, was Thomas. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I opened the email I'd drafted a few nights earlier. The one with links to the Dropbox, the photos, the calligrapher receipt, and a short, simple note. "Before you raise a glass, make sure you know what you're toasting." Then I sent it to everyone on their guest list. Co-workers, college friends, family, the florist, the officiant, a few people I didn't recognize by name but whose emails were listed with +1 next to them. I didn't write a speech, didn't call anyone out. I let the facts speak. That afternoon, Claire's mother called me 3 times in a row. I let them ring, then checked the voicemail. "This isn't how families handle things. You've embarrassed her. You've humiliated all of us." I smiled, just a little, not out of satisfaction, just confirmation, because they still didn't get it. I didn't humiliate anyone. They did that all by themselves. The real fallout came 2 days later. Melissa texted me, "She's calling off the wedding." Then, vendors pulled out. Her dad froze the funding. Thomas's sister posted a statement. It's everywhere. I didn't check, didn't need to. I already knew how it would unravel. Not with fire, with silence. One by one, people stopped replying, stopped defending, stopped pretending it hadn't happened. The narrative collapsed because it couldn't support the truth. Thomas, gone. Word was he pulled his name from the lease on the condo, took a job in another city, didn't even wait to see how Claire explained it. And Claire, she tried reaching out once more. A long email, pages, maybe hundreds of words. I never opened it. I archived it, labeled it closure, and moved on. The ring she once wore was left on the counter in our house. I let the realtor find it. The house went on the market a week later. The photos looked beautiful, like a place someone could start over in. I hoped they would, because for me, starting over didn't mean burning everything down. It just meant no longer asking to be seen, no longer shrinking to fit someone else's vision, no longer being the placeholder in a life that was already scheduled to replace me. People still ask me what I did next. Honestly, I slept. I woke up in a room where no one was lying to me. I made coffee without wondering who someone else was texting. I answered to no one, not because I was bitter, but because I was free. They thought they were erasing me quietly, but I'd already written myself an ending, and made sure the whole room read it. That was my revenge. Not a shout, a signature.